Right. So, the weirdness of the placebo effect and the strange kind of ironical way in which con artists and fraudsters sell things to you, or you acquire things on your own through your own little mental processes, right? Which don't work in the way that they say they're going to work, but do, in fact, or I should say rather, can, in fact, have a measurable effect. So it's crazy, but drinking some castor oil infused with like raw alcohol, makes you a little drunk or whatever, right? That some charlatan is selling out of the back of a wagon in some old western town. If you really believe him, if he's very convincing and very persuasive, it may in fact have a measurable effect on lower back pain, right? And not just because you're a little drunk and therefore a little anesthetized, it could even have a longer lasting effect. And this could be measurable over a group of statistically significant people using a control group in a double blind study, right? How does this work? Well, it works because of something called the placebo effect, right? Um, and so this is an effect in the brain that goes way back to the early evolutionary function of our brain, which is that if something is really believed, uh, or even if it's only believed kind of in a weird way, as some of the evidence seems to indicate, right, it can still have an overall effect on our, for example, our physiology, right? Or in some cases, on our psychology, our kind of emotional stability. So, felt experience then has a measurable, statistically significant effect on actual experience, right? So, this means that the sort of incredibly successful multi-billion-dollar market for all kinds of alternative medicines or therapies, right? Which, you know, if you really break down the kind of chemistry of what's going on and the way that it interacts with our physical organism, there's no real evidence for such a thing to actually be having an effect. But once we take it, ingest it, believe it, feel it, trust in it, even if we're kind of laughing at ourselves at the same time, it can indeed have an effect. And there have been many, many examples of this in which scientists have been, because scientists are like these very rational people, right? They're always like sort of so shocked by the fact that, oh my God, if you give Jimbo there a sugar pill and tell him it's, a critical form of medicine, all of a sudden the symptoms that Jimbo's feeling kind of go away, right? Now, listen, let's not exaggerate the effect of the placebo effect, right? First of all, it's variable. Second of all, the effect seems to be pretty slight, right? And third of all, it doesn't do like things, like you're not going to cure cancer with any kind of predictive likelihood with the placebo effect, right? However, it can make you feel better. It can do things to do with chronic pain, like, again, not so dramatic, but like, yes, it can reduce pain, it can increase comfort levels, which means then that because what we believe tends to have some small impact on actual reality, that means it's incredibly lucrative, right? The moment that you come up with a cool story and a cool looking object, the example from the text, right, is that hologram bracelet that everybody was wearing. It's kind of too long ago now, but it was very funny at the time. And the company did quite well for a little while. So, drilling down even more into the placebo effect, we notice that it's something that a lot of pro athletes are big into, right? Both the rituals, whatever socks you're wearing, or you're not shaving your beard during playoff season, right? Or praying, right? Which is another a classic one before or after a game, if you're particularly religious. And what's interesting about this is that does this mean that pro athletes are more superstitious, or heaven forbid, the stereotype of the dumb jock is more true? No. In fact, if anything, the opposite is true, right? Because what's going on here is that in professional athletics, like the other kinds of highly paid activities, right, the margins between somebody who is successful, and commanding top dollar on the free agent market, and between someone who is almost but not quite at the pro level, right, is tiny, right? And so the effect of placebo effect of belief, right? That you might ascribe to a ritual that you always put your shirt on a certain way, wear it backwards, comb your hair a certain way, right? You do everything the way that you've always done it, right? These tiny little felt effects are going to have an outsized statistical impact on things like scoring goals in the NHL, for example, right? So instead of the fact that professional athletes ascribe so much and have all these crazy rituals, and if you ever get closely involved with professional sports or are a journalist, you'll know this. It's because, again, the difference between competitors is so kind of tiny that these felt effects, these placebo effects, are going to have an outsized impact, right? So again, who cares, right? If it works, why not do it? Well, keep in mind that there is a problem over time if we correlate, incorrectly. So this can have an impact, right? Now, harmless little pre-game and post-game rituals are fine, but let's be careful and not to go back into history and really think that crop rotation and the success of a particular, harvest is because of how effectively we dance the rain dance, right? That's going to cause many more problems than the nice activity of dancing around in around springtime will fix, right? So at that point, we have to be very, very careful. So the point is, all of these little rituals that are kind of fun to do, like I am no different from anyone else, right? In that I might, drink kombucha or eat probiotics, in an effort to kind of stay healthy, to boost my immune system, whatever. The evidence for this is very, very sketchy. It goes up and down. There's clear correlation. It's very hard to prove. There's not a lot there, honestly. I do it because I kind of enjoy it. It makes me feel better. And I feel these sorts of things are part of being a human being, an irrational, emotional creature, as I am. However, I'm not only an irrational and emotional creature, right? I'm also a person who, as we are doing in this class, can retain some aspects of critical thinking, can identify, in fact, particular fallacious ways of thinking, habits of thought, right? I can see myself doing this stuff and wanting to think that something works because it worked that one time, right? Or it worked a couple times, right? And so kind of repeating them in this particular way. So the important thing is not to worry too much about your talismans or your charms or the little rituals that you might or might not do, but recognize the role that they play in human life, where they belong. Make them stay in their area, right? That's, I think, the key. Don't let them start creeping over into the area of thought where it's like, no, this actually proves causation, or this is the only way to achieve this outcome, or everyone else who thinks differently about this sort of thing is wrong, right? And, sort of like, well, because my children didn't catch a disease, but I fed them sauerkraut and yogurt, right? Therefore, and I and my friends all kind of believe this. Therefore, it's not necessary to get them vaccinated from like mumps, rubella, or something like that, right? We don't want to go down that road. Like, by all means, continue to practice the placebo effect in the ways that make you feel better, and it can be creative, and it can be fun, and it can be kind of like a nice, kind of common thing to share with other people. You can also kind of laugh at yourself a little bit, which is good to be able to do. But make sure that stays in its own area, right? And don't apply the post hoc fallacy to larger areas of life. And, recognize in yourself the tendency exists. Cool.